Breaking Bread is brought to you by North York Community House, an organization that builds strong, resilient, and inclusive communities in Northwest Toronto.
It's time for a shift. This is the shift. Big change, big things in the phase. Yeah.
My name is Kaydeen Bankasingh, and I'll be your host for this episode of Breaking Bread, Stories of Black Communities in Transition. Our limited podcast series seeks to take a deeper dive into redevelopment and uncover the truth about this phenomenon in the city of Toronto. Throughout this journey, we'll be speaking to residents and industry experts to shed light on the experiences of those living through these major transitions, providing further insight into the real consequences of urban redevelopment. This is episode 8 of Breaking Bread, Stories of Black Communities in Transition.
Tired of the self-hurt, so I put in that self-work. Tired of the self-hurt, so I put in that. Yeah, this is the shift. Big change, big things, a new phase. Yeah, big change, big things, a new phase. Yeah, big change, big things, a new phase. Yeah, a new phase. Yeah.
In our last episode, we spoke with Trudy Ann Powell, a resident of Lawrence Heights, about equitable redevelopment and the action she's taking to ensure the Lawrence Heights revitalization process is fair and transparent. Today, we have Anyika Mark, who is joining us from Black Urbanism Toronto, a grassroots organization that advocates for communities in Toronto undergoing redevelopment. And I'm also very happy to have you here with us today. So we're going right into the interview questions now. And if you can introduce yourself and a little bit about BUTO's work in urban development in Toronto.
Yeah, so my name is Anyika Mark. I'm the Director of Communications for BUTO, which stands for Black Urbanism TO. We consider it a duty to ensure that Black business owners and residents along Eglinton West have the ability to engage and influence in policies and plans that directly impact their livelihoods. So that really, for us, means that we want to make sure Black communities are a part of major projects that are happening. We specifically work in Little Jamaica, but we're really hoping to expand our reach to other Black marginalized communities such as Regent Park, Weston Mount Dennis, Jane and Finch, because we know these communities are also going through massive redevelopment projects, massive quote unquote revitalization. And I say quote unquote because revitalization really means gentrification, but nicely. So we really want to make sure that our communities are empowered and they feel that they're leaders in a conversation that they deserve to be at. We built these neighborhoods and we deserve to be able to profit off of them, just as our city is going to in the next 10, 15 years, however long construction is going to take. But we deserve to not just be victims of the demise, but change makers in, I guess, a new Toronto.
Wow, thank you so much. That is such a critical, I think, and conscientious approach to the work in the communities, and definitely like meeting this gap or this need that exists, how at least how I feel people are able to stay, stay in their communities through redevelopment, because it doesn't really feel like that's possible a lot of the times. So I'm wondering, if you can tell us a little bit more about your role, because you said, you've really empowered business owners, individuals, communities to be participating. So tell me a little bit more about the role and how you do that, and maybe some of these urban development projects, and maybe expand on in the ways that your work actually supports Black residents, community members, and communities.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been doing a number of projects, and really a lot of BUTO is really a bottom-up type of organization. We really pride ourselves on, doing activities, producing consultations, producing reports, speaking to city officials, developers, et cetera, stakeholders, with the insight of community. So that's our number one goal, is that we speak to community first, and then we take that information out there and we advocate. We do our best to advocate, raise awareness, get reports together, things of that nature. So I just want to say that's a really big part of kind of how we go about our conversations on redevelopment, specifically urban redevelopment. So one of the things that we're doing right now is we are researching, we're invested in a project called Pathways to Community Ownership. So essentially, this would support community ownership research for African Caribbean small business owners, particularly in Little Jamaica. But again, we really want to branch these models out to other Black communities. We want to first, of course, keep it local, keep it to where we know, which is Little Jamaica. But really, the goal is to branch out and be able to have these models active in communities that I kind of mentioned earlier that are also going through redevelopment. So we're kind of looking to do, just different wealth building models informed by community. It looks at Black businesses and the economic uncertainty they face, as well as systemic barriers to accessing financing from traditional leaders. So banks, grants, things of that nature. The city as well. And government resources, so much money to be had throughout our provincial, municipal, and federal government that a lot of business owners, specifically the ones that we work with, don't know and aren't connected to. It's imperative that we bridge this gap by securing affordable long-term commercial space for business owners within Little Jamaica. This is a really important conversation because a lot of business owners we speak to don't own where they live, where they operate. They're kind of at the mercy of their landlords, who of course now are having, active conversations with developers and, just the prosperity that is coming with the Eglinton LRT construction, especially for businesses that are struggling, not just through the Metrolinx delayed construction project, I'll say, first of all, but also through COVID-19, just the impact that these two macro forces have had on the small business community have been huge. And so, a lot of people are looking to sell or looking for, that number, where they can kind of get it off of their hands, but also cut their losses as well. What they see as what they see as a loss, but what we see as a win later on. And of course, developers also see. So this project specifically is meant to, again, like I was saying, make business owners a leader in this space. If we can begin to develop methods for collective ownership, how can we, potentially get a number of businesses to own their spots? These are now conversations that you're not having with landlords, that you're not having with city councilors, and that developers are not having without you present. You are now an active participant. You are now the person that they need to speak to in terms of what happens with your building and also what happens with the type of business you have, right? Because we know that in the gentrifying process, the erasure of culture is a major key. So, business owners being able to own their spots, we can, continue to have the branding of Little Jamaica. We can continue to have those businesses be Black owned, to be owned by marginalized people, immigrant communities. That's really, really important for us. And I think also a major wedge in, what the development process, how the city would like let me not just say the city, I'm not just gonna put it on the city, but city and also developers, how they would like the area to look. I was gonna kind of talk about this a little later, but the city did have a plan for Little Jamaica. It was called Eglinton Connects. It had absolutely no community consultation, and we figured this out because we did a series of consultations where we brought this plan to a number of business owners and to residents. We, held town halls. People had no idea, absolutely no idea what was coming. But it was a whole, I want to say over 40-page document of what they wanted Eglinton West to look like. And so conversations like community ownership allow us to really put our foot in the door and to really just, pump the brakes on how, the community is going to look, 10, 15 years from now, right? We really want to make sure that our community is at the table, and Pathways to the Community Ownership is going to be one of the ways that we do that. So right now we're currently, we're getting together some focus groups. We're doing some surveys to Little Jamaica residents to get their understanding of what they think community ownership is. What does collective ownership mean to you? How would you like to own, where you live? what does ownership mean to you? Again, like everything we do is from a community-based perspective. So we really want to start there. We want to get people's insights so then we can then, create reports, have research, get funding, get investments, get donorship, and start to really implement some of these models so that we can start being change makers as well. I think the second thing I want to talk about in terms of what our role has been for urban redevelopment is the conversations we've been having at the city. So we have a great counselor, Counselor Josh Matlow, who we have really active conversations with around preserving Little Jamaica, preserving the heritage. And one of the ways that other communities have been able to do this is through heritage designation, which is essentially ensuring that particular sites, different brick and mortar, things like Reggae Lane, for instance, that these places are now, granted, Reggae Lane I think is an interesting conversation because it's a mural on a business, but regardless, in making sure that those types of heritage, the symbolism of those heritage places are able to stay in the area. It's actually a piece of legislation, between the city and the provincial government that allows for heritage to not be touched, for it to kind of endure whatever comes next. So we've been having some really interesting conversations with our city councilor around bringing this to city council, and we were able actually to get a unanimous vote at City Hall about a new concept for Toronto, but it has been pioneered in the States. It's called the Cultural District Plan. So essentially, including things like heritage designation, kind of just making sure that different cultural districts in the city of Toronto are able to be preserved through legislation. So now, when people like developers are coming through, that's now a piece of legislation that they have to contend with when they're thinking about, building condos, or let's say, I don't know, like having like storefronts or a plaza or whatever the case is. These are now, different pieces of legislation that they have to think about in terms of community benefits, in terms of just genuinely like, oh, we're gonna have to work around this brick and mortar building that has been labeled as a heritage designation. So, and this is also a heritage designation for the city of Toronto is really interesting, because you would think places like Chinatown would be, would have heritage designation. It doesn't, which is why you're seeing a lot of, condo redevelopment signs going up in that area. Where you see Kensington Market really being also gentrified out. Even though these places are so historical to our city, we're going to lose them because of gentrification. And so, having the cultural heritage designation and the cultural district plan at the City Hall right now really gives us some important leverage to keep culture alive and to remind, our city, and to remind developers and just abroad, like just the general consensus abroad, that culture in the city of Toronto matters. So yeah, I think that is also one of the ways that we kind of wedge our foot in the door in terms of urban redevelopment.
Wow, you just touched on so many,
No.
no, like just fantastic and fascinating pieces of work, and ways like really highlighting why the approach to the work, and to me, what I was hearing is like why the approach to the work and how you approach meeting community, of being able to move forward with processes in the city also reflect like the values of why you're doing the work, right? So it's like, being able to bring the voices of residents forward, protect ownership. I really, really appreciate the idea of wealth building initiative, right? And like, as you said, because that is not something I've heard quite articulated in that way, in that kind of meaningful way of like, yeah, we're trying to build wealth, help people to stay, help protect their businesses and our community. So much real, detailed and valuable pieces of work that you shared there. Yeah, so much. Thank you very much for everything that you do. Okay, so I'm wondering now, because like even just the initiatives, right, and the approach that you're taking to some of these areas of work, to me, I kind of heard, even without you going into detail into them, just kind of reflect the complexity of how
Mhm.
you approach the work, because it's money, it's power, it's politics, developers and all these things as well. So what, like, the next
Yeah.
question I have is, if you can let, again, this is for our podcast that we're creating, and we're trying to find ways to help build awareness and enable people to interact with knowledge, and even the technicalities of language around redevelopment in different ways, right? So kind of take it out of the process, all the heavy political processes and things. So I'm just wondering if you can let listeners know who are the key players in
Mhm.
the development projects in your experience?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. Um, the first thing I want to do is I want to honor community, and I want to say us. It's the people.
Yep.
Our mobilization means something. It isn't just, like we are such a powerful force, and we can be such a powerful force when we come together and we make our needs known on a uniform basis, and we bring those concerns forward. We are the change makers of the future. So I want to honor community in that way, and just really emphasize that it is us that can be the the biggest key players in development projects. We can have the communities that we want. We just have to be able to find a way to do it together. I would say the next, in terms of like industry people, of course, just like one of the most long-standing ones, especially for the Little Jamaica community, but we see this happening in Western Mount Dennis, Jane Finch, would be the Metrolinx and Crosstown entities. So these provincial transit construction companies that have come into our communities to build light rail transit, which is streetcars that are going to be built, or subway lines, sorry, that are going to be built like on top of the street instead of underground. It's a really great initiative, because so much of our communities lack access to or like direct access to the subway lines. So having the light rail transit would really connect, especially a lot of our community residents, particularly that are making those long commutes, that are traveling long distances to get to work, to get to school, to see their families, to have families. It is a really incredible expansion of transit in the city. However, I think comma, they're also a part of the gentrifying of communities, right? So, because we work with a lot of business owners, we know the types of impacts that the construction has been having on brick and mortar shops, one, but also, just on business owners in general. So we work with a number of people, but I want to point out, somebody particular, Jason McDonald. He has he's had a business. He's had a beauty salon in Little Jamaica for over 30 years. It's called Casual Beauty Salon. It's right at the intersection of of Eglinton and Oakwood, right there at the intersection. And one of the major things, or some of the major concerns that he's been having, is one, the lack of transportation. Of course, with the construction, it's been eliminated, and also the conversation around TTC in the area has become limited, just because of how far-reaching and how obstructive the construction has been. Like, if you go to Eglinton, and it's a conversation that everybody has, of like, oh, the traffic on Eglinton is terrible, because they reduced it to a one-way. But more so, like, businesses have been boarded up. There have been massive gates, and there have been long pipes all over the street, and there literally have been like no pedestrian access to so basically the Eglinton and Oakwood, the subway station is being built say on the left-hand side, right? So wherever the subway stop is being built itself, those areas are literally just boarded from like start to finish. So people haven't been able to see businesses, they haven't been able to get to businesses. this is major in terms of, consumer traffic, in terms of revenue to the stores. Like Jason has, of course, adapted in so many ways, and he's such a resilient business owner. But there haven't been people that have been so lucky, right? Folks have had to literally close on their shops because of the fact that people just can't see them, because of the lack of accommodation that Metrolinx was providing. Of course, later on, when community started advocating that, we couldn't see businesses, and, consumer traffic was low because of this. They made some efforts, but this is what when I talk about community consultation being number one, is like, why was this not when you were planning out to come into a local marginalized community with a number of small businesses, why was it not a factor in having a conversation with them as to how their businesses can still be promoted, right? So that's a major key, because if there's no traffic, there's no consumers, how do you keep a brick and mortar store going? How do you pay rent? How do you keep up with utility fees? How do you keep up with any of your day-to-day expenses in general, right? It literally is forcing you to close your doors, and to sell your business, and I guess, during the 12-year period, selling your business was not even a real conversation, because who was even going to buy a vacant property in that area at that time, right? So literally cutting people off at the source, which is major. And then I think, of course, another major concern is that Metrolinx will not compensate business owners for damages that happen because of the construction. Again, major, because I'm not even getting consumers, I'm not getting customers to my business to begin with. How am I supposed to pay for damages that I have no control over? Folks like Jason have had, a number of bug and rat infestations, flooding, literal cracks in the building. When they approach Metrolinx on it, it's a dismissive, oh no, maybe it's not us. Maybe it's something else, even though we're right next to the construction. And I wasn't having any of these concerns before, there's a gaslighting of our small business owners. I can speak to a number of business owners that have this, this concern as well, Jason not being the only one. But the gaslighting of Metrolinx has been very real. And so I want to point them out as being a key in the redevelopment, because they are one of the push factors. They have been a major push factor for a lot of our businesses, and a lot of our residents in the area as well. Like, it's hard to live in an area that has massive transit construction. And also just like the obstruction of the traffic it makes day-to-day life very hard. Like, you can't even walk on the sidewalks in Little Jamaica. Now, granted, it's getting better, of course, as the construction starts to thin out, and hopefully they've delayed the process again by, I think, a year or 2 years. So we're even looking at we're still looking at this construction is continuing for a long period of time. But, Little Jamaica has been a construction zone, which has been really hard for a lot of people. So I would say Metrolinx and Crosstown, major player, because they do have the resources to compensate business owners. They do have the resources to accommodate business owners and residents in the area. If you go across the street, we're at Eglinton West Subway Station. If you go across to Eglinton and Bathurst, literally 5 minutes, I want to tell you, completely different neighborhood. And we're not even talking about a 2-minute walk, okay? You can see the difference in how the community over there is treated versus the community on the side of Eglinton West. Very different conversation, very different look. The obstruction of the construction has been very different. The quickness of construction has been real. And literally, anybody who's, any listeners right now, if you have the time, go on Eglinton West and go from Eglinton West to, near Eglinton and Bathurst, and you will see what I'm talking about. Is a completely different neighborhood, and they're literally not even 30 seconds apart. So, yeah, Metrolinx, major player. Developers, of course, another major player. Now, these, because construction has taken so long, I can't really identify to you exactly like who it is that's coming into the community now, right? Everybody's kind of, playing it safe. We're waiting, we're seeing, we'll invest when we see what the end result is, so I can't really say who the players are per se, but we know that, developers are going to start to have more interest in the community, as the construction starts to thin out and as things start to clear up. And these are going to be major investors into the community, and a lot of people who are going to have a lot of power in terms of what community is going to look like afterwards. They play a major conversation in community benefits. Again, love that I shouted out community in the beginning, because community also has a major part in advocating to developers what it is that they would like to see in a community benefits framework. So community benefits, for those that don't know, are things that are invested in that benefit community. So that could be parks, that could be community centers, that could be youth hubs, which we know we need in Eglinton West. Things that, even things like plants, like plant pots on the sidewalks, public art. So public art kind of being, if you go to, let's say, if you go to Greektown, you see how they have that arc that says Greektown. Little things like that developers can invest in, and also kind of with the right advocacy have to invest in. So developers are a key player. Current landlords, people who own buildings right now, people who are leasing out buildings right now, major players, because they can sell at any point in time, but they can also keep their buildings, right? They can also keep and decide to maintain the cultural legacy of Little Jamaica as well. So they're a major part of where we're going to be going forward. But also a really interesting conversation we've been having at BUTO is, who are the landlords of vacant businesses right now. So if you go on Little Jamaica right now, you'll see a lot of vacant storefronts. You'll see a lot of, just signs in the window, or just like nothing at all, just, buildings that are empty. We don't know who owns these buildings. We don't know who these people are. We don't know what they're going to do with these places. They aren't really making themselves known to city officials or to any of the people that we've kind of been in contact with. So they're a mystery at this point, which, kind of adds to that gentrifying piece of like, so what are you going to do with all of this retail space, all this commercial space that we could potentially be using for community, things like youth hubs, art centers, respite sites, a number of things. Like we could really be giving these, spaces back to community in the time being. But we don't know who these actors are. So it leaves a big gap in the conversation. And then lastly, I want to talk about, of course, City Council being, a major advocator potentially in development, in redevelopment. So they can be at the table with little developers being like, hey, it's important that we get community benefits here, right? They're able to push legislation in City Council. And also they're able to be a liaison for community members. Again, we have a great counselor in Josh Matlow right now, doing amazing work at bringing our concerns to City Council and really fighting for us over there. We also just got Alejandro Bravo, who was elected in the Davenport area, who we're hoping is also going to be an ally in the fight, and who has been a really active community member and community organizer in general. So we're really excited to be working with her in the future. The conversation around Keelan Eglinton, Councillor Francis Nziata, is an ongoing one. But again, that's where, community comes in, because, our councillors will wave to community voice. So, our residents at Keelan Eglinton are doing such amazing work that it's hard for city councillors to ignore us. So yeah, I'll say that about who the key players are.
Oh yeah, it's deep, right? Like I think I appreciate so much that you started with the residents, because often we'll see ourselves either not in that list of key players or at the very bottom. And then some of the issues that you listed are the ones that we understand, right? Clearly our developers, our political representatives, but then you said landlords, and I'm like, oh wow, I didn't even consider how existing building owners, right, are involved and or might be missing. So and how everybody contributes to yeah, this overall picture in different ways.
Absolutely. And also
Excuse
just because a lot of our business owners are like at the mercy of some of their landlords as well. So it does become, if you're a landlord, let's say Raps, for instance, like if their landlord was like, hey, we're bouncing, that puts our cultural legacy at risk immediately, so yeah.
Yeah, it's so quickly too, right? Like there's no way to fight somebody saying I'm going to sell my building unless you're able to purchase the building from them, right? So I imagine that just leaves a lot of that means not only the community members, the business owner, everybody's vulnerable, right?
Exactly.
Everybody's vulnerable.
Yeah.
This conversation with Anyika is not finished. She'll be joining us again next week to finish this discussion about equitable redevelopment from an agency's perspective. This is the shift. Big change, big things in a phase. Yeah. Big change, big things in a phase. Yeah. Big change, big things in a phase. Yeah. A new phase. Yeah. This is the shift. Vibrations been raised.
This podcast is brought to you by North York Community House. North York Community House builds strong, resilient, and inclusive communities in Northwest Toronto. We help children, youth, parents, and seniors become active, engaged citizens who lead positive change in their neighborhoods. Find us at nych.ca.